glasses up here.
Next up, auditing, Ray Lutz, electronic and software engineer, national coordinator and co-founder, CitizensOversight project. And you can check it out, CitizensOversight.org.
Okay, thank you. Looks like it's coming through okay. I'm Ray Lutz, CitizensOversight. I've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to go fairly rapidly, but it's just going to be wet your whistle for future conversation, hopefully. Background about myself, I'm basically a nerd alert, okay? And background in document processing, facsimile standards, multifunction peripherals, printers, scanner, fax copiers, all that I had in my background. And recently involved in overseeing audits. And then in the last year, really looking into risk limiting audits and what they are and what their shortcomings are. So I'm going to give you a brief overview. I was here last time, and we were then working on some lawsuits. And I'm going to cover an update on that. Describe the limitations of the RLAs, or the statistically sampled paper audits that are being promoted pretty aggressively. And give you my best vision for the future, which is ballot image audits as a first step, followed by looking at paper to validate a core set of the images. And then also this announcement of this tool that we're developing in the cloud, which is AuditEngine.org. Okay, common ground here. I like what Karen McKim said yesterday, so I'm taking this to note. Let's agree, robust audits are essential in protecting our elections. However, audits done improperly are nothing but theater and can cover up acts. That worked pretty good. I like the comment. Okay, so we were organizing teams to oversee audits, and if you're in a county, anywhere that does audits, I want to work with you and get you trained on how to do it so that we can make sure that you're looking in the right place, the least amount of effort to get the most traction. In this process, we discovered that San Diego was not covering 7% of their ballots with the audit. They were just disregarding them. It's in the law, you're supposed to do it, so we said, you should include those. They decided to say no. Then we'd rather go to court, which we took them to court, then won the first lawsuit. Then it was on appeal, and they decided to change the law with AB 840, so it said it's okay to do that. So you have these officials who are slimy people because they should know that they should include all of the ballots in the audit, sampling from all of them. It's like an IRS official that says, I'm going to check your taxes at random time last year, but not anything after August 15th. Guess when you're going to cheat, because you know that in advance. So we also attempted to access the 2016 primary ballots because we saw a lot of strange numbers in the Hillary versus Bernie Sanders contest. And we went through a judicial contest attempt and also a CPRA attempt, and we got a bunch of things, but they were all failures. But we learned a lot. Now, what is risk? You hear about this risk-limiting audits, but the way they use that term risk, the RLA community, is really improper. The term risk in any other, technical application, and this is usually the probability risk assessments that have been used by engineers for years on nuclear power plants and NASA fish flights. The risk is defined as the probability of an adverse event times the consequences. Okay, you don't care about something if there's no consequences. Even if it might happen, there's still no risk. Okay, there's basically zero. If something has very high consequences, but it's extremely rare, then there's also a low risk there. And of course, what they do is this hodgepodge where they say, well, the nuclear power plant will probably not have the failure, very low risk, but the consequences are immense. We're going to multiply those two together, And one of them is what's called a swag, a scientific well-best guess. The other one is a swag 2, and swag squared is guess what? You know nothing. So they can manipulate this. You got to be careful. However, the RLA advocates don't analyze all the aspects of risk, and they don't consider the comprehensive risk, especially about the process itself of performing the audit. Now, the key hazard in these audits, no matter which ones they are, is that the election officials are auditing themselves. Big problem. Okay? And election workers seek to get a clean audit. They don't understand that because all the way through the election, they're solving problems, right now, they're problem solvers. Fire drill, clean it up, fix it. Audit happens, oh, you're not allowed to fix anything. All of a sudden, you have to report all the problems. They don't understand that and continue to fix the problem. And then they get a clean audit and they say everything is fine. But that doesn't work in that case. So it's kind of like the example of if you had TVs on a production line. And let's say you have 1,500 TVs, 1,500 precincts that you can check. You're going to take a sample of 1%. Take 15 TVs off the production line, you fire them up, and some of them don't work. So you fix them. Now your sample works. But does the production line work? No, there's probably big problems with all the rest of those TVs on the production line. So this kind of innocent fix-up occurs, and even the people that are there, the advocate, the activists that are watching it, don't know that they should be calling this out. Now, audits need to be simple, simpler than the process that they're checking. If your process of checking the process is more complex than the process itself, you're going to have more problems doing that than you did when you first did the process. It's got to be simpler. Now, this is I'm going to give you a test on this. So really watch it. Okay, let's go on. Okay, election hazards. This is actually what you guys already are aware of. I tried to put it all into one chart. All right? Registration. There's hazards with registration. Malicious, you put the date really early. You try to change what's in the registration. This is in I have a sign of this outside and I can provide it to you. But this is a process where voter validation. Are the voters validated? Are there long lines? All of these hazards all the way through. Now, none of those things are caught with these type of audits, whether there were large lines. And also, these hazards don't cover most of the stuff we heard about earlier, such as gerrymandering, such as campaign finance, such as election false news and all that stuff. Not included in this at all. Okay, those are other hazards. This is only the voting process itself from registration all the way through. And even with this, the audits only capture a little smidget of this. So when we get down here, we have ballot images are created, and then the cast vote record is created from the image, usually very quickly within the machine. And that happens here at the polling place, and if you have a central count scanner. Then they take, at the polling place, they get the ballot images, and they get a thumb drive, put it in a box, transport it to the central office. They put it all together, and eventually what you want to get is some postings on a secure posting service that has a trusted timestamp, such that they can't backdate, make changes and then backdate the timestamp and make it look like they did that originally. Once it gets on a secure posting service like sharefile.com, they have trusted timestamps. They cannot go back in and then change it. Once it's on there, it's fixed. Otherwise, they change the timestamp. So these ballots eventually come down here with the thumb drives, and it's all combined until you get a complete cast vote record of the entire election, and then they may report that. But we want, for our purposes, we're trying to oversee the audits. We want to get the cast vote record image file and also the poll list. Who voted at the polls, who voted by mail, so we can compare all that. Now, some mistakes are expected. Voter intent mistakes. We rescanned that batch twice. We forgot to scan that. This happens in every election. Simple mistakes by the election officials or voter intent things. That's different from malicious attacks, which are very rare, but could happen, as we saw, which Benny Smith was showing here. Many of them can occur pretty easily. I'm going to just cover this very briefly. This is the RLA approach, where you get the ballot manifest. As we heard from Professor Stark, you've got to find out where all your ballots are. You pull them randomly. He says stir up a pot of soup and take a tablespoon. It isn't that easy. The actual thing is you don't get to stir the pot that way. All the ballots aren't flying around and you take a sample of them in the air. What actually is that they're all rigorously set. It's like your pot of soup is basically frozen. You've got to come in there with an eyedropper and pick out one drop from some place in the middle of the soup and put that in the tablespoon, then go with the next drop, until you have enough to taste. But then you don't swallow either. You spit it out because it doesn't go away. So it's very, very hard to do these risk-limiting audits. And in fact, there's many. I've heard this one here. It pushes humans to the limit of their ability to handle paper. If you see the verified voting video of Colorado, you can see the election official says this is about as much as we possibly can do with human beings. Very hard, very hard. So there's all these manual steps that allow innocent fix-up, as I said, people fixing things when they shouldn't. You can construct it so that it would be possible to oversee it such that those things couldn't occur. I tried it because I know how to watch audits. It's going to be very, very hard to watch these. Very, very hard to train people to know what's going on and get it so that it's just not all theater. And if they go in the back room with their statisticians and come back out and say, okay, we checked it, everything's fine, guess what? I'm not too happy about that. Now, the RLA risk that they talk about when they talk about risk-limiting audit is only the error rate of sampling. It doesn't include all of these other risks in here that occur in the process itself. Now, I'm going to show you some of the severe weaknesses of risk-limiting audits. The first one is that when you get close contests, the sample size shoots up. So in a ballot comparison audit, which is the most efficient type of audit that they have designed, this is where you take one ballot at a time out, exactly which one, and you can compare it with the exact cast vote record for that ballot. It requires that you have all the ballots all numbered, and you can go fetch exactly with that ballot. Not easy to do with precinct scanners today. Those ballots go in, they fall into the box. Also, the cast vote records get scrambled by the software, so they're not indexed together. The only way this works is in central count scanners, where they can put a number on each one, and they can go fetch that ballot exactly. Even so, when you get down to 2%, the number of ballots starts to shoot up through the roof. Okay, and basically it goes up. It's a 1/x relation. So as you get closer and closer to zero, as the race gets closer and closer, and guess what? What are the races we're most interested in? The ones that are a landslide victory, over 10%, and are easy? No. Those are not even that interesting to me. It has to be down to less than 3%, is the ones that maybe somebody hacked that election and put it at 3%. That might be the one that we're interested in. And if you're down at 0.5%, you're going up here, you have to get thousands of ballots, which is just infeasible to do for human beings. Ballot polling is even worse. This is where instead of comparing it, basically you go out and get a sample of ballots, like we saw in the video that was just created, where you're going out and picking ballots out, and you're forming a margin, basically, and seeing how that margin compares, margin of victory, how that compares with what they say it is. At around 10%, it starts to go up. And maybe you want to say 5%, it's really shooting through the roof, but look at the numbers, 5,000, 10,000, 15. And sometimes they say, look, you got to go get 60,000 ballots out. Individually sampled ballots out of a whole bunch of pallets in the corner, you're going to be sampling these. It's a lot of work. Now, there's another way of doing it, which is batch comparison that I do recommend if you're going to do this. You take batches out at a time, and you sequentially look at all of the votes, and you total them up and compare with the total that they have. It's a comparison process, but it still has this same property. As the margins get close, they go through the roof. Now, other thing I just recently discovered about all our RLAs. They are not intended to cover all contests. They only cover the most consequential contests, the main, key races, which is fine. As long as you understand that. You're not trying to audit everything. Colorado does one statewide contest and one countywide contest in each county. Now, the problem is, in those counties, you have school districts, mayor's races, city councils. Take a school district. A school district is our mayor's race. All mayor's races are, by definition, not overlapping with every other mayor's race. They don't overlap. So in that little tiny area, you have to go in and get the number of ballots based on the margin, not on the size of the district. So if you had a margin of 2%, guess what? You're going to have to get 15,000 ballots. Oh, well, maybe there aren't 15,000 people in it, all hand counted. So if you're going to do those small races, you're probably going to count them all. The people that promote risk limiting and audits do not tell you this fact. They are not covering all the contests. Now, in the 1% manual tally in California does cover all contests with at least one batch. So it does cover them to some extent. Risk limiting and audits don't. There is no magic behind it. Just because they say they can opportunistically cover contests, they do not magically get covered. And if you don't cover all the contests, the RLA community does not tell the election officials how to cover which contests to choose. All the time I see this. I was down in Florida and they pick one race to audit. Which one is it? The judgeship race with no one running. It's just one person. Yes and no. Those are inconsequential. They should never be audited if you're going to choose just one. How do you decide what's consequential? I just mentioned what I was thinking is that you can do it by how much people spend on these. Okay? That determines almost by definition how consequential they are. A typical house seat, which are very even throughout the country, about the same size, $1.3 million is the average spend. In comparison, the presidential race in the last few times, the total spending was $2.6 billion. So that's about 2,000 times more spent. That's much more consequential. What is a ballot image audit? That's where we get a high-resolution image of every single ballot, and it's not it used to say ballot image was the DRE, memory content. That was the old definition. That's not what this is. So some people are confused about that. This is an actual high-resolution image of the actual hand-marked paper ballot, or whatever they're putting in. Most modern equipment that's being sold today produces this image. I don't know of any that don't. Well, some of the DRE machines, but the ones that have hand-marked paper ballots are all doing it this way. Now, a ballot image audit exhaustively means 100% recomputes the election based on all the ballot images. We don't leave any of them out. We don't sample it. It's just we consider them all. It's compatible with crowdsourced audits. You don't have to have a machine do this. You can have a whole bunch of people go in and do it. Say, everybody take 100 ballots and give me the total, and we'll do it with a few thousand people. Done. Then you can also validate the ballot images by comparing them to the paper to see. And you'll only want to do that with consequential races, the ones that might be hacked. Now, I claim that with validation, ballot image audits will reduce the overall risk, including all the risks in the audit itself, to a lower level than the RLAs can do. I disagree with Dr. Stark that image validation is somehow harder than doing an RLA. It's about the same. If you want the same kind of risk that they talk about, you can do the same process, and that validates the images too. It's the same. But Ballot Images audits cover all contests down to the ballot. It does not explode into costly hand counts, and it can detect a lot of hazards even if you don't validate the ballots, the images. All the voter intent issues are checked, you can determine those. Nearly all election processing errors, whether you scanned another batch accidentally or you rescanned one twice. And nearly all malicious attacks like fraction magic that we saw would be caught by a ballot image audit. Only one that's left is if somebody is able to install in the scanner a piece of software that would modify the image before a cast vote record is created. Now the cast vote record compares with the image, and we wouldn't detect it. But that's a very hard thing to do. We can still check for it by checking the paper. So it's still possible to check for it, but it's a very, very hard thing to do. And all the rest of the hacks are caught. So it's a very powerful thing, even though it does have that one error. Now you'll hear them say, ballot images cannot be trusted. Nothing can be perfectly trusted, guaranteed that. Am I even here? Is this really stable? I'm not sure. So you can't really trust anything that you see because there isn't anything absolute. However, you can still figure out, and there's ways to make it very, very hard to modify the images, such as embedding security fibers or other things that haven't even been done yet. As I said, valid image validation is when you actually review the paper, and a basic RLA, what they're talking about, would be sufficient to do that. But now we cover all the other contests. So the only malicious attack I just mentioned is only going to be for consequential races. You don't have to go and check dog catcher race to see if somebody embedded the change inside it's just too hard to do. Also, these scanners running at full speed, they would slow down if they were doing anything like that. So my recommendation is this, and I think this is the way we will get to eventually once all the dust settles. We're going to need to use ballot image audits first for all of this, and then cover all the local races. You cover all the voter intent issues, all the processing errors, and there's issues here that we have to be careful of. So we have to secure the ballot images with hash codes so they can't be modified, with trusted timestamps so you can't go back and redo them. And you can use the independent ballot image audit services, which we're going to announce. And then a batch comparison audit to validate the images. Okay, just a limited one. Now, we're announcing here, for the very first time, a new service called AuditEngine.org. AuditEngine.org is a cloud-based service where you upload ballot images into the service. You put in the cast vote record that you claim is correct, if you have it. You put in the poll list, which we still need to get that standardized. We need to know how many people voted in each district in a way that we can interpret, because we want to compare them. The hash codes, so we know they haven't been changed in adjudications if there's any in there already, but we may be applying those. You press go, and what the cloud services now do is you can deploy thousands of processors on things. So if we need thousands of processors, it'll go out and do 10,000 processors at a time and get it done quickly. Very hard to do yourself. So that's why the cloud is good. They have these new things, Amazon Web Services, and they have a thing called Lambda, where there's no physical machine that's all virtualized, and any number of machines can be added. Then you get a report back, and you can then do the changes that you need to. There's usually going to be some fix-up that you need to do to the data. Now, I'll give you an example of this really quick. I'll get it started anyway. hopefully you can see that. This is it's running on this one machine right now. It's not, I'm not going to give you the cloud-based view, but this will just let you see it run. We're taking the Dane County 159,000 ballot set. We're only going to process 200 here. First thing it does is it loads the files. It's loading the Castle records file, which is pretty big, so it takes a minute here. And then the first phase of this, what it does is it goes out. It doesn't know anything in advance except the basic skeleton of the ballot, where it's going to look. It doesn't know what contests are on the ballot. It then explores the ballots and see what contests are there by computer vision kind of techniques. And then it accumulates the styles. It says, I've seen this ballot style before. It starts to put them together, and when it gets 50, and it can average them out, it decides where the marks are supposed to be. Okay, in this first phase, it's going through the first 50, which happen to be all the same style. It's gathering up the style information. It doesn't rely upon the XY coordinates of the marks that all other voting machines use. So they can just flip those XY coordinates in their voting machine and be pulling out different things. We don't do that. We go in there and read the name in optical character read, what the name is by the mark. Okay, it got 50, and now it's going to the next ballot. This is how fast it hits the ballots. You can see sometimes the percentage is high on some of the marks there. It's going to go ahead and complete the other 200. So we'll let that run. And I'm going to go back to the presentation. And make these the final points, and then we'll go look at the results. Audit oversight is important. We need people in every county to watch these things. I don't care what it is, what they're doing. They have to watch what they're doing right now. So the goal here, the general goal of Citizens Oversight is we're not trying to change the whole world. We're trying to deal with what we have. Luckily, we have audits being done. And so we can go in there and watch them and make sure that they're done right, and we're miles forward. What do you need to do? Ensure that the Castle record of the computer report is frozen and published before they randomly draw what precincts that they're going to be auditing. Watch and record that random draw. Bring in your video camera, if they'll let you. Sometimes they try to arrest you, but stick up to your guns. And then watch what they do after the ballots are tallied. What do they do with them? Now in Los Angeles, what they do is they take the carefully tallied ballots and say, gee, they match, we'll report that. It's only off by 1, we'll report that. Oh, it's off by 10? Let's see what we should do about that. We'll run it back to the scanner again and get a new report. Disregard the one that was wrong. Now look at the new report, everything matches. Report the way everything matches now. Well, what they just proved was, this is innocent fix-up. What they proved was the original report was faulty, could have been hacked. Now they've just covered it up. All the time, done, constantly. They cover it up, and people down there still think I'm the bad boy because I say they haven't been watching it right, and they need to call that out. So you got to watch what they do and then review the reports. All right. Now moving forward, we need volunteers to provide oversight in every county that does the audits. We want to get as many ballot image audit sets as possible in from different vendors so that we can run our machine across them. And I encourage you to spend more time to understand the trade-offs between independent audits and ballot image audits, because it's not an easy topic. I've run through it really fast, and I don't expect you to understand everything that I told you. But trust me, I know what I'm talking about. And in terms of between me and Dr. Stark, I'm the one that you should trust. So I have my contact information there and get on our list. We also have Election Scam Clearinghouse on Facebook. If you join that, you do publish things there. Now let's go back to the thing that is running. It should be done by now. Okay, so it's done. And let me just look at one of the races here. You can maybe see the contest name is Town Board Supervisor. It was a vote for 2 race. we found the selections of Bruce Hudson and Lawrence Beck as the ones that were indicated on the ballot. The metric value for Bruce Hudson, we saw 90% there, 87%, and only like 1% on the other selections. And so that's what the machine is going to happen here. So we can look at that later. We'll go up here and see what the ballot number was for this. This is ballot number 203-593I. Okay, we'll remember that. Now let's look at the report, which I let this actually fail a few times so that you can see what the initial, and also we're working on it. What otherwise you'd say a report that says everything's fine. Now we want to have some problems here. So in some of these, it says no matching record, and the reason for that is if all you do is click on it, like when there's a difference, you click on the link, you get to see the ballot and see what it looks like. As we look at this ballot, what it's finding is that, so close here, good, that the ballot here says Edgerton School District School Board Member. Okay, but the cast vote record says Edgerton School District Board Member, right? So this thing is, you know, computers are mindless. This thing is actually reading the text on this. It wants to find that in the cast vote record. So you have to say, okay, well, on the ballot, we have the word school, and in the cast vote record, we didn't put this word school twice. And so now they're matched up. So that's one step that has to be taken by the analyst. However, let's go down to, now I've forgotten what it was. Well, it'll be the one at the end here.
Ray, if you talk closer to the mic.
Okay.
It's for the Facebook feed. Thank you.
All right, so let me make sure that the one we looked at in the console here, 203-593I was the one we just looked at, and it's back a few. So let's just go up here a little bit and pull the one. Here it is, the exact value. All right, so that didn't for some reason my demo's not working on that. But the concept here is that if you let's pick a different one that I don't know why that one didn't work. It could be because I'm working over. Let's go up one less here. So this one has Abigail Staff and Lawrence Beck are the ones that are selected. And what's the number there? 203-580. Not in exact order. I'm sorry, but I don't know why it's not putting them up on my local machine. It could be that the demo's not working. Let's pick a random different. Okay, let's do it that way. We can find this. But basically what it's doing is it walks through the ballot. It looks for the name. As you can see, some of them are smudged because of the way they scan them. And so what it does is it averages out the ballots and then learns where these marks are. So it doesn't rely upon any information from the election official at all, except for the ballots and the cast vote record to figure it out. And then what will happen is when we get it all finished is in this report will be the discrepancies and then overvotes. You can go through the overvotes and look for which things maybe it looks like people voted twice. We've seen some of those where personal color one say, oh, I don't really like that one. I want to do the other one, and they strike that out. And it depends on which state you're in as to whether that should be considered a vote for that top guy that you didn't strike out. California, it would be. And you consider that what the voter intended. Versus some states, you go, we don't consider that. Whatever, if you fail to put it in right, tough beans. So there's different state rules, and we're going to have different configuration files for each state so that we can, help you with monitor the voter intent. How can this be used? This can be used by oversight groups, candidates that want to review the ballots for their race, or election officials that want to do the right thing and do the ballot image on it first, and then, check them later. And that ends my presentation.